Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias una vez más.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for being a part of this webinar cycle. Today, we're going to be talking about super apps with GeneXus. GeneXus is the first low-code platform in the world that allows you to create super apps and mini apps from scratch. And this talk is coming to you thanks to Leandro Bonisha and Pablo Mazzilli. I would also like to tell you that you have simultaneous interpretation available into English and Portuguese. So without further ado, I'll leave you to the speakers. Thank you so much, Aníbal. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. We have a lot of people registered and attending, so thanks a lot for your time. Well, you all know that today we will be talking about super apps. As Aníbal was saying, GeneXus is the first and only platform that allows you to create a low-code super app digital scenario, just like any other super apps that you can see today in the Asian market. And we are doing this webinar because precisely we want you to learn more about our technology and what we mean when we say super apps. So Pablo and myself will be telling you more about this. Pablo is a product manager at GeneXus for super apps with a lot of experience in the platform. And I'm country manager for different territories where GeneXus is present. I've been in the company for a year, just to tell you a bit more about that. And well, briefly, what do we mean when we talk about super apps? Who are we going to build this for? Who might be interested in this? What kind of bodies or enterprises, government bodies, companies, etc.? Why end users could be interested in this? Why this is so important? So I will try to briefly touch on all these things and give you a few examples. And also we will talk a little bit about the trends on this issue, and then we will talk about the approach that we have in GeneXus and how we do this. And then Pablo will tell you a bit more about this in further detail. So what are super apps? What do we mean when we talk about super apps? Basically, we're talking about digital ecosystems. We could be referring to products or services that generally include all the financial side of things, for example, payments, and which are hosted in a single application. Nowadays, we are very used to having on our phones maybe 50, 60, 80 different applications. And in a world with more super apps, we would have fewer applications, but each application would be providing us with more services. So by super apps, we mean these applications that host a number of applications in one single ecosystem without you having to leave that application. I'm trying to explain this as simple as I can, but then we will get into further detail. So who can have a super app? Who might be interested? With our technology, we can develop a super app or convert an existing application into a super app. In any case, where you have a native application that has been massively adopted and you would like to convert that into this kind of digital ecosystem, then you could, well, or you could also start a super app from scratch with GeneXus. When we talk about super apps, we talk about the company that owns it and also the owners of the different mini apps, which involves third parties, for example, business allies or strategic partnerships or organizations that are related somehow to the owner of the super app So they will also hold an interest in that super app. So this is what we will be talking about. What industries are most prone to super apps? Where do we see the fastest growing interest, and where are the biggest number of questions coming from? Well, mainly in these that you have on the screen: banks, fintechs, telcos, also government bodies. But these are just a few ideas. It may totally be applicable to many other industries, and I'm sure that you can think of many. But these are the most typical examples where we see that there is a very interesting fit, and Pablo is going to be sharing with you a few examples, one in the banking industry, also with the government, where we see a growing interest around the world. And then why are we talking about super apps? What's at stake? We think that this is a great opportunity both for the super app owner, as well as for developers and end users as well. Normally, we're talking about really big opportunities in terms of product cross-selling, the way of maybe trying to have more upselling opportunities, for example, using an API to reach a much more vast audience. And also the increased consumer spending, which will result in new revenue streams, both for super app owners as well as for those other shops or companies or organizations that will be integrated to the ecosystem as mini apps. So in this scheme, what you have is a diagram where you have on the one side users. In my case, it's to the left. I don't know where you see it. And then to the right, mini app owners. So we clearly think that this is a great opportunity to increase spending and interactions by users on this super app by offering a source of volume for those strategic partners, by integrating to these digital ecosystems. Also, we create new revenue streams for the business. And we also see that these super apps tend to build customer loyalty and much more engagement through new products and services. We have a vast array of examples for this. Maybe one of the best known cases is WeChat in China, which was not, of course, developed with GeneXus. They developed their own ecosystems. But with GeneXus, what we're doing is we're giving you a technology that we are certain will make this much easier in the Western world, because this is agnostic, where the application owner may develop this very same concept using our technology, and you don't have to just be, let's say, married to one single technology that could be the one chosen by the mini app owner or the super app owner. In the case of this very specific case, which is WeChat, it's really well known. Most of you must have heard of it, and the adoption rate in China has been crazy. People usually interact with WeChat throughout the day. They have the different times of the day where people are interacting one way or another with WeChat, and what WeChat seeks to do is to capitalize each of those interactions with its users so that they can generate more opportunities. And that is exactly what we believe we could achieve with our technology. We have several examples. We also have Alipay, Grab, Gojek. Now, recently, we went to the Middle East, and we came across this very interesting application that is being developed in a super app fashion in Dubai, which is called Karim. We have seen also a few initiatives in municipalities in Italy, which is like a local government idea to integrate all the different services for the community and its citizens. And we do believe that this is a trend. We see this whenever we take a look at the different consulting companies. For instance, Gartner is anticipating that by 2027, more than 50% of the world's population will be active daily users of multiple super apps. So we believe that the world is going in this direction, and why understanding this phenomenon is so important, and what we can do with GeneXus is also key. If you just Google it, you will find a lot of information on super apps, a number of initiatives around the world, such as the ones that I mentioned and a few more. And this is where I would like to explain what we mean when we talk about this GeneXus approach, because sometimes we are calling a super app a very large application with a lot of features, as you can see here on the left, that also comprises a payment method. But these are not necessarily applications where they are developed by a third party. Let's say that everything is integrated to the super app. But the approach that we have in GeneXus, you have the possibility of having mini apps by yourself, but also by any third parties that could develop those mini programs or very little, very light applications that will interact with the super app. Whenever we talk about a super app, we're talking about this ecosystem and not so much the application that has a lot of features, yeah, a lot of functionalities. These are functionalities that are very specific for each type of interaction that you want to have, and they always interact within the super app without the user having to download a new application from the Apple Store or the Play Store, because it's going to be dynamically loaded within the super app that you will create. So what is the role of many applications? As you can see here, they're lightweight apps with a particular functionality, which is that they're built to offer a similar experience to to the one that you could get with iOS or Android. As a matter of fact, they are native applications. And this is how applications like WeChat and Alipay have grown within their ecosystem. They build alliances with third parties, with external partners, and they integrate that many applications to the digital ecosystem. So this is the introduction of what we mean with mini apps and super apps. But I would like to refresh very briefly what GeneXus does. Several here in the room, I'm sure you know about what GeneXus does, but just to have everyone on the same page and give you a very simplified explanation, we can say that GeneXus is software that makes software. Yeah, so we are a low-code platform where you can model all your knowledge and your business logics, and the generation of the application, whether it's web or mobile, is automatically done. Yeah, this technology will do it for you, simplifying the development process and the maintenance process that will happen eventually. And of course, the technological evolution. As you know, the tech world is more and more complex. There are more languages, more databases. Everything is ever changing. And so GeneXus seeks to be future-proof. That means that your applications will remain updated over time without you having to do any kind of manual reprogramming that could be considered substantial. So what we seek is to speed things up, and that is actually what we achieve. You can develop applications for iOS, for Android, with the same knowledge base. And what we did was to develop this technology for super apps and mini apps, and this is where I'm going to hand it over to Pablo for him to tell us a bit more about this in further detail. Amazing. Leandro, thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Tell me if you can see my screen. Yeah, good to go. Awesome. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. As Leandro was saying, in GeneXus, we've been working on this for more than 2 years. Something quite interesting that we realized is that when we started seeing the impacts that this kind of solutions was having, in particular in the Asian region, and more specifically with WeChat in China and Alipay, we thought that giving services through super apps had a very interesting potential. We started talking about this. We started giving presentations on this idea and these projects and the first prototypes that we had on this kind of solution. And when we presented this to companies, it was something that it felt kind of weird. It was quite new. We didn't get that much buy-in, and we needed to explain to them why this kind of technology was going to have that much adoption. And that has changed substantially over the last couple of months. Leonardo, being in the commercial team, he can tell you about the number of companies that are reaching out to us and are asking us what our solution could be to build this kind of ecosystem for their companies. This is also mainly happening in those areas that Leonardo was mentioning, such as fintech, well, financial companies in general, also at government level, telecommunications. So mainly the financial industry, because let's say that it works out one of the key issues involved usually here, which is how you can simplify the payment method, but it doesn't mean that maybe other kind of solutions could incorporate that method of payment. So with GeneXus, well, we are the only low-code tool that has the capacity to build the whole ecosystem, because the solutions that you see nowadays is super apps, and you have it in the cases of WeChat and Alipay. They are the best known. They have a platform, and you build mini programs, as they call it, for that application, for that platform. So it's not that you're going to build another super app with your development tool. They have one platform that they own, and you need to adapt everything to their programming language, which is HTML, to build mini program solutions for that super app in particular. But with GeneXus, you can build any kind of super app, which is what we think is going to be happening from now on in the West. I don't think that there's going to be one super app or just a few that will be ruling the world, but rather more and smaller super apps. And GeneXus gives you the possibility to build that ecosystem, not only from scratch, but also you can convert any existing application into a super app. And I believe that the key point here is that you can take any application with a massive adoption level that has a large number of users, and that application that those users already know and they have high levels of loyalty, that can be turned into a super app, and you will be adding this feature of providing more services through that same super app. And those services will be provided through what we call mini apps. What this does is it provides you with new sources of revenue. It doesn't mean that you will just keep your users and that you will be giving them solutions to all of their everyday needs, but also that this ecosystem of cross-selling and this possibility of improving user experience is readily available. When we say that GeneXus is a technology that helps you to work out the whole of the ecosystem, what we mean is 3 key components in the architecture of this kind of solution. First and foremost, as we said, you need to create a super app, which is just like creating any other native application that will have the capacity to eventually be loaded with mini apps, or you can convert an existing application. And true to what GeneXus has been since inception, which is to be agnostic in terms of technology, now we give you the possibility to build any application, to turn any application into a super app. It does not need to be a GeneXus application. It can be any other native application that was developed for iOS with Swift or Java for Android, or even platforms such as React Native or Flutter, which are very common. Well, you could turn all of those applications into super apps by incorporating what we call the super app render. This is an SDK that amongst many other things, what it does is it allows you to load mini apps within that main application. So where are these mini apps coming from? That is the third column, but let me focus on it's going to be in a place called the Mini App Center, which is a repository, and the super app owner is going to give authorization to third parties to develop those mini apps and publish them in that Mini App Center. So they're going to be in that repository. Those mini apps could be 100% native, developed with GeneXus. So the render gives you the possibility to render an application natively, any application that you develop with GeneXus, that you can do so for Android or iOS. That application can be dynamically loaded and it's natively rendered. And you will also have the possibility of loading web applications, which is something that we are working on already. You can work with a web application within a native framework with GeneXus, and you can load it as a mini app, but we will see very soon the possibility of loading a 100% web application without needing to actually use that native framework. So the three components are this render, so that you can have an application that becomes a super app, then mini app development, which are the mini programs that will be nourishing that super app. And these are applications that are absolutely independent from the super app. They are deployed in their own infrastructure, but what will happen is that they will have a sort of communication channel between the super app and the mini app for those services that the super app will be offering for each mini app. A clear example is payment, right? It is the super app that will be in charge of processing payments, and that is going to be one of the main processes that the super app will be giving to the different mini apps and the people who develop them. So you will be able to pay for that service through the payment method of the super app, and they will be communicating with each other. As I was saying, this is, in a nutshell, the architecture. The Mini App Center is an infrastructure that you're going to get as code so that you can install it in your own infrastructure. That's a web back office that is going to be nourishing the application with the available super apps. Then we also have the mini app approval by the super app owner, testing, and so on. And as Leandro was saying, we've been working already on several projects. There is one that we have made a substantial process, and I would like to show them for the first time to you. It's a project. It's one of the main banks here in Uruguay, but also in the whole of Latin America, which is Itaú. It's one of the first projects that started working with this technology. They have an application that in Uruguay it's called Itaú Pagos, Itaú Payments, which is basically an electronic wallet that is available for you to download from Google Play or Apple Store. And that is a native application. It's iOS native and Android native. It was not done with GeneXus, and they converted it into a super app using the GeneXus render. And through different associations with some of the businesses that have certain partnerships, they have already incorporated the first mini apps. And this is in a we could call this a friends and family production environment. It will be soon in production for the rest of the bank users. And if you take a look at the screen on the right, you have three different companies from Uruguay. The first one is Red Tickets, where, of course, what you do is you buy tickets for different shows, sports shows, theater, and so on. The second one is in the retail business. It's an e-commerce where they work mainly with stationery products, toys for children, and several other articles. And the third one is a movie theater, where you can buy tickets to go to the movies. And they have several theaters in Uruguay and the different shopping centers. So movie is it's one of the most renowned movie theaters in Uruguay. And they have agreements already with these shops. So basically, this kind of agreement is that you get a discount if you pay with your Itaú card, whether it's debit or credit, and so on. And before, what happened was that on this application, they showed a list of the different shops where you had where you could find a discount. But they took another step and they built the application into a super application. And now the user can directly buy those products using the discount of the bank through the application. So when the user selects one of these mini apps, let me open it here to see if, okay, so what will happen is that when a user taps on, for example, movie, what's happening there is that the movie application opens on your screen, which is a native application, and that is happening from the super app. They didn't need to download the movie application. They don't even need to go to the website because, for example, here in Uruguay, the only you can do it only through the website. They don't have a native application, and now you get the chance of to buy your ticket through the application. So without having to download the application, the user just clicks on this, and you will have access to all the different movies that you can go see at the cinema. You see that the look and feel of the application is very consistent with the movie application, web application. So they feel like they are interacting with movie. You get the typical process to buy a ticket, which is adapted for the application. I'm going to pause here just to show you this, which is when you select the different payment methods, instead of having all the different options that you would get if you did this through the website, it's filtered just with the different payment methods that the user has described for the super app, because the super app is going to define the payment API, the communication, so that you can interact with it. The mini app will not be receiving any kind of information on the cards, for example, but only the kind of cards that the user has. So, for example, if the user has only a debit card, like the first one, on the one on top, that's going to appear and nothing else. Once you select your payment method, you choose the number of tickets, you choose your seats. This gives you a very good user experience than if you compare it to, much better than if you compare it to the website, the different snacks that you can buy. This also happens if you're on the web. And the interesting thing is that once you go through all of these steps, then the mini app will just require some information so that they can send a ticket to the user, and they get that from the mini app. And when the user clicks on pay, if you go to this previous screen, all these screens that we are seeing belong to the mini app. But the moment that you click on pay, you invoke the super app. So this is already Itaú again, where you have all the information that you have available depending on the option that you decided before. In this case, you have, for example, all the debit and credit cards that the user has. And when you click on pay, that is done through the super app. Once the super app clears the payment, it will send an approval to the super app, which is, for example, in this case, the QR code with a ticket, so that the person can show that at the entrance of the theater and just watch the movie that they want to watch. So this flow the super app, apart from incorporating the render so that it can natively load mini apps, it will create an API that will expose that will be exposed to those that develop mini apps so that they can have this communication channel. As we saw in this case with a movie, we have three communication methods. One, to get the payment methods of the user, which are, this is something that is, by the way, always defined by the super app owner. The second one is to get the basic user details so that they can send an email with a payment confirmation after they purchase the tickets. And this is an agreement that is also agreed between the super app and the mini app owners, depending on the information that will be required for this case in particular. And third is payment. So when you click on pay in your mini app, that will invoke a super app screen that will be the one that will manage the payment, so that the mini app will not have to know anything about those payments and what card was used and the numbers and so on and so forth. It may be given as an additional service, but it's not necessary. So that API is used by the different mini apps. So for example, I was showing you this case with Movie where you got to the pay button, and this invokes a super app screen where you can make that payment. But if you run the Moscow application, it will follow the same process. You will be you will realize that the look and feel of each screen is very similar to the one that you have on the Moscow website, where you can choose the products by category, you can sort them by price and so on, and you can make a request to the user whether they want to have it delivered or they're going to pick it up at the retail. And then you have a summary, and finally, when you click on pay, that is going to call the super app screen with the method that is exposed by the super app. Then you get a confirmation for that payment. And of course, you will get an email and so on and so forth. The same thing for red tickets. The same process as we described it before. You see that the super app screen, when it comes to the payment, is always the same, but the only thing that's going to change is, well, the currency, some filters that could appear, and so on and so forth. So this is, as I was saying, a project that is already in production. I think that this opens up a vast array of opportunities, and we're going to take a look at the benefits for each case. But why GeneXus? As I was saying, we have this GeneXus render product, which will give you the possibility to dynamically load any application and with a 100% native interface within another application, the super app. I think that that is one of the main differentials that we have in GeneXus at the moment. The cases of WeChat and Alipay, they're basically web applications that are rendered within the super app. In this case, we're talking about rendering native applications. And this opens up the platform so that super app owners can include their own services. So for example, you could create a super app and feed it with services that belong to you as a super app owner. So having a more incremental development of your solution through mini apps instead of having one large application. But the key aspect here is that also third parties could incorporate those services into your super app. And depending on the scenario, the case, and the super app, it could be a huge advantage depending on the business. This is a safe architecture and it's secure because the rules are defined by the super app in terms of the access to the information that the device has. But each mini app is going to be running on an individual sandbox. So there's no way that mini apps can communicate with each other unless there is an explicit agreement between those two applications. Otherwise, there is no way that they can know what another application is doing. And through this mini app center component, you can speed up the time to market for this kind of applications, because you don't need to publish this on Apple Store or Google Play. It's going to be published in this mini app center, and all the governance is managed by the super app owners. It's them who will decide who may publish and make available different mini applications for their super app. And once they get published, they can do all the revision process. You can ask many apps to meet certain criteria, standards, rules, and you can approve or reject an application. Maybe you can choose to just have it offline for a while. That is up to the super app. And all of this is leveraged with using GeneXus. GeneXus as a platform, as a development platform, it's going to guarantee that all of this is future-proof. This means that you can convert any application into a super app, but also it allows you to evolve. So if tomorrow there are new development platforms, you will be able to convert that into a super app. And on the mini app side of things, It's what we've been doing for the last 20 years when it comes to mobile development, or even more, maybe than 20 years for web applications. Always being aware of the latest trends in technology so that these mini apps can evolve accordingly as the platforms do. The benefits are many and varied. For the business, I think that it will allow them to expand this service offered to their partners. And you can, what Leandro was saying today, right? You can capitalize on most of the everyday interactions that your users have. You can capitalize on that through one super app. They are very likely to keep on using several applications, or at least more than one super app, but you are capitalizing many of those interactions in one application without them having to download different applications or get in and out of different applications. And this is going to have an impact on, let's say, for instance, if you offer one single payment method, the fact that everything can be done through one super app, that's amazing, because by centralizing that information, you can have a better understanding on that user's behavior and to customize services to them eventually. For development, regarding the super app, we're talking about converting an application into a super app, which is a very straightforward process. Through this super app render, you can get a list of mini apps and you can dynamically load them. And that is a very simple process that is well documented for the different platforms. It accelerates implementation times and it simplifies development integration, in particular for mini apps. All these components that are a commodity in most applications, such as, for example, user identity or payment methods, they're not usually the core of what you do, but they're just commodities that you need to incorporate into your applications. But because of that, they're not complex. They tend to, this kind of integration tends to be usually very complex, and in most cases that would be worked out by the super app, because the mini app will just be invoking a functionality of the super app to approve a payment or work out of the authentication authentication stage, and that will be already by default for the mini app. For the users, and I think that at the end of the day, this needs to make sense to users. I think that the most relevant thing is that these super apps will give you instantaneous access to services. You don't need to download an application and install it in your phone, register, input payment details. But the moment that you want to use that service, you just dynamically load it, you run it, and you leave, and that application will be gone. And it will not be consuming any space in your device. It is much more frictionless. We also talked about security and data privacy, which this architecture allows you to manage well data. For example, super apps will not be sharing any kind of information unless explicitly stated otherwise. They don't need to share information about user identities and credit cards. That's going to be defined by the super app owner. And of course, you need to have the user's consent for that. But I think that the greatest advantage of this application, and because of the bank that we were just seeing, is that you can do everything. All the sensitive data management is done through the super app, which is the application that you trust, because the other two applications are just mini apps that will be incorporated. And more often than not, you would rather not have to incorporate all that information every time. And for the partners, so the people that will be collaborating through mini app development, we have the possibility of offering a new sales channel to make your services available. This doesn't mean that Movie or any other service will not choose to have their own mobile application, but why not have as well a mini app version that will be targeted at the users of a certain super app? So this is yet another channel where you get exposure of your services to your users. And this definitely improves brand exposure. And needless to say, having new channels may result in improving revenue. And of course, this is a secure platform. Developing this kind of solutions, such as mini apps, well, with GeneXus, you can do it with all the advantages that GeneXus offers for multi-platform development, developing native applications, but also we're working to incorporate as a mini app any kind of web application. So to sum up, and we can delve into the Q&A session, we think that we have a really good solution for super apps that truly allows you to accelerate business growth. Based on our experience and the projects that we have worked on, we see that in a very short time, you can build this kind of ecosystem, and converting an application into a super app is something that is done in a matter of weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then the greatest challenge is to create, to build the business ecosystem in terms of the partners that you will be having on that super app. And that provides great advantages for systems integration. All these mini apps that I was showing are applications that are basically reusing all their existing services. So whether it's Movie or Moscow, Red Tickets, these are all applications that were developed in a front-end environment like GeneXus because they wanted to have a native experience, but you're basically reusing all the APIs that these businesses already have. So that means that development time is much shorter. And this is because of the advantages that you get with GeneXus to integrate these systems in a very straightforward way. So I would like to invite you to try this out. We are at your service, both from the commercial team with Leandro as myself. And if there are any cases where you think that this kind of conversion or this kind of ecosystem would be feasible, we're here to hear from you and work together. I think that for the whole GeneXus community and partners, participating not only in creating the super app, but also mini apps is really important. As these different super apps emerge, there is a very interesting advantage or opportunity for the partners community when it comes to developing these mini applications with GeneXus to give that native experience to your users. So Anibal, maybe you want to take over and let's have that that Q&A session. Okay, thank you so much. Great presentation. We have several questions. So let's start with Marcelo Bustamante. He says, the mini app presentation, you're talking about this as an integration process with another business. Couldn't it be a complex system that is built step by step, and the mini app will be a functionality of that system? Yes, absolutely. I briefly touched on it, but yeah, it's a completely feasible scenario. You developing your application in an incremental fashion through mini apps. Not only because that would mean that it's much easier to develop when you do things incrementally, but also not having a large application where services, you would end up having a smaller application and loading services dynamically. In the corporate sector, for example, I think that this is gonna happen very often. So at a corporation, you will be able to provide a super app, and depending on your user's profile or the area where you are, you will have access to different mini apps. Okay, I have a follow-up on this question, which is, are you thinking about the possibility of having hundreds of mini apps in a super app? Yes, indeed. This architecture will allow you to have as many apps as you need. As they are dynamically loaded within the application, the super application, there is a cache mechanism that is stored for a while. This is something that you configure when you develop, because if you're constantly accessing a mini app, it means that you will not have to download it every single time, but also considering that they load really easily. Yeah, considering that, you can have an infinite number of mini apps. Pablo Volarte, he wants to speak. He wants to say something. Go ahead, Pablo. Hello, how are you? I didn't know where I was supposed to send my question. That's why I raised my hand. Yeah, but you can just, yeah, go ahead and ask your question out loud. I had several questions. First of all, the authentication, the entry point. I'm guessing that that is managed by the super app, right? Is that negotiated with each mini app? Do they have to, does each mini app need to develop that if it's a third party? Yes, yes, indeed. That will depend on the scenario. Because, for example, you could choose to have a single sign-on, which is in the case of a corporate super app, for example, where you just have access to different services and you want everything to be and everyone to be authenticated with the same identity provider. But in any case, it is the super app that will be managing the authentication, and in some way, in those services that the super app is providing the mini app with, they need to send a token which will mean that the user is already authenticated. If you're talking about external services, then you need to agree and to have agreements between the different businesses, whether or not they will require authentication, because in some of these cases, the purchasing process is anonymous. So what you want to avoid is logging in twice. So in that case, you will have a process where you will not require login and you will just buy anonymously. But if for any reason you want the user to be logged in so that you can associate accounts, for example, I don't know, and take a look at the last purchases, then in that case, you will need some sort of negotiation between what the super app will offer as authenticated and what the mini app will do for those accounts to be associated. And you don't need to ask the user further information again, because you know that every single time that a user accesses the mini app through this super app, it has already been authenticated. But we will give you further documentation of how you would have to overcome this. Okay, yeah, so you're talking about an agreement between the mini app and the super app. Okay, great, clear. Another question, what benefits would I have as a mini app to integrate to this super app, apart from people will not have to download my application? How can I get, my question is, if I build a super app, how can I get those mini apps to come to me? Usually what happens in these cases is that it is super apps, the ones that take the lead. So for instance, you have Itaú with this idea, and so far it's Itaú, the company that's seeking through their strategic partners the different services that they want to provide. But eventually it will be the partners who will want to be on the Itaú platform, and they will ask Itaú, what do I have to do to be here? In fact, what you're allowing the mini app owner is to have access to a number of clients. It's another way of branding and marketing their products, if you think about it. Maybe people that you would be missing if you just had your own application. For example, think about all the bank users. It would be like increasing the client's portfolio then. Yes, absolutely. And I think that also the user experience is positively improved because it's very integrated. You don't need to download a new application or leave the app. Everything is done from one single point. Amazing. Okay, yeah, sorry. The last thing that I want to say, and I'll leave the microphone. We are building a monolithic application. We're in the middle of a GeneXus migration with so many headaches, and I am really interested in what you said. This idea of having one super app and integrating features as we develop them, that could be really Cool. So adding new modules and stuff. And every single time that you want to try something new, you can release it and test it. That would be really, really nice. So yeah, thank you so much. Okay, I've got a couple more questions. Mauricio Valverde says, as distributors, how can we have an environment to show in every country? We have a sandbox, Mauricio, for testing that we make available for specific cases. But if you need to build a demo or something, yeah, do tell us. Actually, we have a kit so that you can make your presentations and we can share that with you. Okay, yeah, Alan precisely was asking if we had a sample KB to download. Yeah, it's as follows. Now we can build external applications. We can turn external applications into super apps, but to build the super app with GeneXus, we still need to develop a few things. We need to enable some features, some functionalities. So we're trying to have, we're trying to work to have a full GeneXus example. But what will change when you are publishing an application, for example, is that you don't need to compile it and send it to the Play Store or the Apple Store, but the development process is very similar to mobile development on GeneXus. To create a super app with GeneXus from scratch, we are working to incorporate it in the development environment, in the IDE, where you expose the app and so on that had not been modeled yet. And you can do that with an external application because it's manual work, but it will be ready available. And as soon as we have it, we will let you know so that you can see how you can create your whole solution with GeneXus. Great. Eduardo Galeazzi is asking us, what requirements should an app meet to work as a mini app and be integrated into a super app? That is when this mini app is not built with GeneXus. Okay, so if it's a native application, it will not work as a mini app. So if you want to keep on giving a native experience, what you need to do is to build your front end with GeneXus. You will be using all your services and business layers and data processing. You can use all that, but the only thing that you will need to do is to have your front end built with GeneXus, because by generating with GeneXus, you will get the format, which is the language that can be natively rendered by the super application. So what you need to do is choose the front end, and then you're using everything that you had already built for your application. If it's a web application, you can incorporate it as a mini app by incorporating a framework in GeneXus, which is like a web view. And that framework will allow you to communicate with the different methods that the super app has, such as payment and so on, identity and so on. And what we are currently working on, and it's going to be available for the next quarter, is that any web application, regardless of whether the experience may not be ideal or just like a native web application, those web applications that were not built with GeneXus, they can also become super mini apps. Okay, very good. We have another question by Hiram Cavada. It says, having different functionalities of a system such as mini apps, could you limit the mini apps to certain users? So for example, that certain users can have access to certain mini apps and others don't? Yes, you could. Eventually, absolutely. Very good. I've got another one by Mauricio Valverde. He says, if a bank incorporates, let's say, 200 mini apps, how does the user sort them out? How does he choose? How do they choose which ones they want to see? Which ones could be their top choices? Okay, that's a great question. That is that depends on the super app implementation. So all the user experience that you want to give is going to be basically the development of the super app. So when you're developing the bank application, for example, The render will give you the possibility to connect the mini app center and have access to all the different mini apps that were approved for your version. But then if you want to show that as a list or with a search bar, that will depend on the way that you develop your super app. Or maybe you want to apply some filters and so on. That depends on the design that you have and how you want the discovery of those mini apps to be. But this is not a minor step, of course. It's included in the documentation. And one of the things that you need to do is to design how you're going to present it. So we have, Pablo, an example that we're working on, which is a bank that is present in several countries that is thinking of using the same application that they have now as a super app for different countries. So from the mini app center, we will have to filter depending on the country where the person downloading the super app is. And that will change what you will be able to see, what each person will be able to see. Okay, two last questions because we are running short of time. Mauricio Valverde is asking us, what are the requirements for the mini app to interact with the super app? What do you need to ask to those third parties that developed the super app? Okay, if it's a native application, it's GeneXus 18, and it will depend on the render that you have in your super app, which GeneXus version you have, and they should be compatible. So for example, they are incorporating a super app in GeneXus render that is GeneXus 18 upgrade 4, then many apps will need to be associated to that version. And then also super app owners will need to provide them with the API that they will be using to interact. And also in the best case scenario, a testing environment so that you can test your application. In the case of, for example, using or providing a payment method, you should be able to allow them to invoke that, and this could all be mocked, so you can do it in testing, but generally that's what they do. And if they don't, you can set it up together as an external object for testing. That is for the development stage of the application. So you need to emulate the integration with the different contact points that you will have with the super app so that you can develop everything and see that the flow of the application is working as you expected. And once the development stage is over, which is the integrated testing or revision stage, you will need to have access to a testing version of the super app to test it with the actual methods to see how it works, and you can try a payment and see if you get it back from the super app and everything is approved, just to make sure that everything is flowing seamlessly. But in the initial stage, what you need to have are some guidelines, usually design, that will say, for example, when it comes to payment, it needs to have this color, and the previous screen needs to know that they're transitioning from the mini app onto the super app. So there are some design rules that could be predefined by the super app owner. And then in terms of the external object with the methods that you will have to invoke from the super app. And that is what the super app owner will have to provide mini app owners with during the development phase. Okay, very good. A last question. Could you go over the sectors that could leverage this technology and why those and not others? Okay, yeah, briefly, Pablo, allow me to say this. We talked about banks and fintechs, telecoms, governments. Also at corporate level, you could have one application with a lot of internal mini apps for internal use. But these are the sectors where we see the greatest interest because of what we've seen happening in other places. But I'm sure that this could apply to many other industries that we are not mentioning. So if you come up with anything, let us know. It's more than welcome. Any application that already has a massive adoption is a strong candidate. That is for sure. For example, in the fintech sector, with the virtual or electronic wallets that are considering the possibility of incorporating extra features or services, that's ideal for super apps. Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Pablo and Leandro. That was a really good presentation, very clear. Thanks a lot to everyone for joining us today. Let us remember that this webinar will be posted on our website at genexus.com/webinars. You can watch this webinar again, and why not see some others that you've missed in the past and what's coming up next. So we're looking forward to seeing you around. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot to everyone. Thank you all.